Hello and welcome to Advanced Burp Hacks for Bounty Hunters. If you're watching this, then you've probably used Burp quite a lot already, but you may be wondering if you've seen every last piece of functionality that Burp has to offer. In this session, I'm not going to document every last piece of functionality, but I'll focus in on some of the most obscure features, with a particular focus on ways to improve your bug bounty workflow and how to resolve certain challenges that bug bounty hunters are likely to encounter. You may know some of these tricks already, but I can pretty much guarantee you that there will be surprises. To begin, I'll look at the repeater and show you some kind of workflow techniques to make your quality of life easier, and then show you how to do some crazy stuff with HTTP. After that, I'll move on to the intruder and look at increasing the ease of use of that and reducing the amount of manual work that you'll have to do, and show how you're often fuzzing with word lists. Then you can actually easily use a tool like Burp Bounty or actually write an extension to fully automate this stuff and never have to do any manual work ever again. After that, I'll take a look at the scanner and focus on how to do the kind of scanning that will find you great findings in a bug bounty context, and also how to avoid running into performance issues and avoid doing scanning that's just not going to get you anywhere. After that, I'll take a look at how to maximize the performance of Burp Suite, so how to minimize the CPU and memory usage, and how to easily work around certain computationally intensive features, and how to minimize your project file size. Finally, I'll take a look at what happens when things go wrong, how to easily investigate what's going on with some simple stuff under the hood with Burp, how to find and fix problems, and then using where to go as a bug bounty hunter. You may end up with a catastrophic overall, it should leave you with a solid understanding of how to have trouble keeping track of them all. Right. Now, we've put in a little trick to make this slightly easier, which is that if you double click on the repeater tab on the number, then you can name the tab to easily find that specific tab later on. You'll also find that we have some pretty solid state management in the repeater. So not only can you use the left and right arrows to the right of the go button to go forwards and backwards, but if you use the little drop downs next to them, then you can just jump forwards and backwards to an arbitrary point in that particular repeater tab state. So although it may be tempting to kind of duplicate a repeater tab a bunch of times to feel like you've definitely backed up that interesting content, it isn't really necessary. You could just use forward and back. Also, if you're looking for something like cross-site scripting and you find that you're repeatedly scrolling to the same point within the response, you might find it useful to know that there's actually this auto-scroll mechanism where you can have a search term and the Burp will instantly jump to that point and will minimize the amount of actual manual scrolling that you have to do. One other cool thing that you might have missed is the target specification on the top right in the repeater. So this defines where your request actually gets sent to, and also what value is used in the SNI field if the request is being sent over SSL. And this means that we have completely independent control over where the request is sent and what the host header is. And that means, as well as some cool stuff like host header tags, we can also do domain fronting. We can pretend to send the requests to one server while actually sending them to a different one. As you can see here in this slightly late demo, we're pretending to connect to googleproject0.blogspot.com, but we're actually fetching the content of El Capitaf's blog. Something else that you can do with the repeater is make use of underappreciated little server feature called HTTP pipelining. This is actually supported by the vast majority of servers out there, but very rarely used because it's considered to be slightly unreliable, which makes it perfect for hackers, really. So what this means is that you can open a connection to the server and then you can send multiple consecutive requests over that connection without waiting for the responses, and the responses will simply come back to you in order. And if a server does anything slightly wrong with this, if it handles it poorly, then that could introduce some pretty serious vulnerabilities, such as cache poisoning. So to do this in Burp, just define the target URL as a streaming response, and then just paste multiple requests in the repeater like so, making sure that you set connection keep alive. The requests don't all need to be the same, of course. You can change them to whatever you like. One thing to watch out for here is that it will mess up Burp's automatic handling of compressed responses using gzip or deflate, but fortunately you can simply ask the server, please don't compress the response to me, and then the problem will go away. Now, as a bug bounty hunter, if you test an application that anybody else has already had a look at, there's a decent chance that that application has already been attacked using Burp Intruder's default word lists. And so if you just use the same word lists, you probably won't find very much, or you won't find anything that they haven't already seen. Fortunately, there's an easy solution to this, which is to define your own personal custom set of word lists that you use to handle whatever situation you run into. And the idea is, if you specify word lists that other people aren't using, you'll find things that other people aren't using. If you're looking for what word lists you should be using as your base before you start customizing it, well, I think the Raft word lists inside the SecLists GitHub project are pretty solid. The intruder is all about reducing the amount of work that you have to do manually. And one of the cooler ways that it can do this is through this grep extract functionality located under the options tab. So here you can easily define a way to say, please get me this particular bit of information that I'm interested in out of every response, and just stick it in a nice column for me. Now, you may have already known that, but what's less well known is that if you hold Control or Command, depending on whether you're on Mac or Windows, and then click on the column sort button, that will copy the entire contents of that column to the clipboard, so you can easily export it into a different format. What this is hopefully beginning to show is that you've got a bit of a hierarchy here. You've got the repeater where everything is super manual and high effort, and then you've got the intruder, which is semi-automated. So this will automatically send the requests for you, but you're still going to more or less need to manually look at the results and figure out if there's anything interesting happening. Of course, we can do better than this. So if you find you're repeatedly sending a payload to find something like an edge side include, and you're just sending it as a fuzz string in the intruder and manually looking at the result, well, maybe you could fully automate that. There's a relatively new BAP called Scan Check Builder, also known as Burp Bounty, which helps you easily build these kind of basic scan checks without actually having to write a single line of code yourself. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. After installing the extension, all you really need to do is name your scan check, define the payload that you're going to send, and then define the response that indicates that the server is vulnerable. After that, you can just customize the issue detail, and then whenever you run an active scan, this check will be run as part of it, and you'll never need to manually send that with the intruder ever again. Of course, if you use Scan Check Builder regularly, from time to time, you'll probably find that you need to do something slightly more powerful than what Scan Check Builder actually supports, to do something like filter out false positives or stick a payload in a slightly unusual place. That's okay, because Burp has an API designed to make adding custom scan checks really quite easy. So, for example, if you look at the highlighted code here, this is from ActiveScan++, and it's only like 10 lines of code required to add a scan check for something that you couldn't do directly with Scan Check Builder. So really, the end goal is to have the scanner doing everything for you for maximum laziness. Which brings us to the question of how do you actually do scanning when you're in a bug bounty in a way that's going to find you things that other people have missed? And, well, it largely depends on what you're targeting. If you've done some amazing recon and you found something super obscure, then you're going to want to just do a normal burp scan that will check for pretty much everything that we can think of. But if you're looking at a target that's quite high profile and has already been hit by loads of other people, then it's probably pretty much a waste of time having the normal burp scan checks turned on, because they've already been tried and they'll probably just get you blocked by web application firewalls and other crap like that. Fortunately, what you can do is you can easily install a few extensions that will find issues that you think may not have been tested for, and then simply turn all of the burp core scan checks off. This will lead to an extremely efficient scan by Burp Suite that will scale to scanning the huge amounts of stuff that you're probably going to encounter during your bug bounty hunting. To help out with scanning when you're doing bug bounty hunting and you're more interested in finding cool issues than you are in checking every single parameter for every single potential issue, and also where you're potentially scanning large numbers of sites at the same time, I made an extension called Distribute Damage. I made this for my own use really, but I have shared it. And this implements a per host throttle so that you can scan 100 sites at the same time, and Burp won't spam requests really quickly to any given site, but it will kind of distribute the amount of payloads that it throws at them. And this also lets you do things like avoid scanning the same parameter on every single path on a given site. And you can customize this using the options as you see fit. To launch it, just go to the target page, select everything, select all the individual requests, and then right-click, do a distributed active scan. Now for everyone's favorite Burp Suite topic, performance. Now, I know that some people will immediately be thinking, well, Burp Suite's written in Java. You're never going to have good performance, and there's no point in trying in any kind of way. But Java's reputation is actually a bit worse than it deserves to be, and with a little bit of care, you can get decent performance out of it. Now, one of the worst killers for performance is poorly written user extensions. So if you're seeing really bad performance, generally the first thing that you want to try and do is disable all of your extensions. The next primary culprit for poor performance is our static JavaScript analysis, which, I mean, it is fair enough, right? If you think about the complexity of what this code is trying to do, yeah, it is going to nail your CPU. And at the moment, the signaling in Burp is not great, so it's hard to see where the performance issues are actually coming from. So if in doubt, just try turning this off and see if that fixes your problem. The third horseman of the performance apocalypse is undoubtedly the sitemap filter. So here we've got some data in a kind of complex tree structure, and as soon as you start filtering it, there's a lot of recursion going on and things can often get quite slow, particularly if you're a bug bounty hunter and therefore you've got an absolute ton of different domains with tons of content in your sitemap. Now, one of the things that we did to try and help out with this issue is introduce this new simple scope feature, whereby you simply define the URL prefix that you want to match, and that enables us to do some major optimizations and makes filtering the sitemap to only show and scope things much, much faster. If you've got to use the advanced scope feature with regexes, for example, because you've got wildcard subdomains which are in scope, one simple way of speeding up is to combine all of your regexes into one regex. This, well, I'm not entirely sure why, but it speeds things up by a hell of a lot. Also, often, if you're just trying to find some specific content, then you don't actually need to use the sitemap filter. Instead, you can use the Burp menu and then use the search function off that. I think this menu is often overlooked. You might be surprised by some of the other features hiding on there, but the search function in particular is extremely fast compared with the sitemap filter because it's fundamentally doing things in a much more efficient way. So that's pretty much it for minimizing your CPU abuse. But you may also find that you run into issues with the amount of memory that Burp's using. Shocking, I know. And also the size of the project files that it creates. And if you remember the fact that Burp is storing all of the data that gets proxied through it in memory and on disk, then it's kind of understandable why it uses up so much memory and so much disk, and you can also understand how to fix it. The key way to do this is to make sure that you define your target scope, and then in the proxy options, way down the bottom, check this little box that says don't send items to the proxy or other tools if out of scope. And that means they don't get persistently stored in memory or on the disk, and your project file will stay nice and small. There's something else about project files that makes them use up rather a lot of disk space. So they save all of your work incrementally in real time. And that's really powerful. That means that you can just randomly pull your power plug out while you're using Burp, and you'll probably lose maybe 1 to 2 seconds worth of data. Probably is the key word here. Sometimes this won't work out, particularly if you're using a virtual machine, which is why we take an additional extra backup for your safety every 30 minutes by default. However, this comes at a bit of a cost, which is that we can never shrink project files. So if you say select a bunch of stuff in the HTTP history and then delete it, your project file won't actually get any smaller. So if you have done some kind of cleanup on your project file and you want to, in order to shrink the size of it, you can take advantage of that, but to do so you need to save a new copy of the project file by using the Burp save copy of project functionality. And as you can see, the resulting project is quite a lot smaller than the original one. Also, you may be interested to know that project files are not compressed. So if you want to transmit your project file, like to share it with someone else or such like, if you stick it in a zip file, it will probably get significantly smaller. The final topic that I'm going to cover is what to do when things go wrong. Now, there's really two different parts to this. The first part is noticing that something goes wrong, and then there's actually dealing with it. To notice something going wrong, in most of the tools it's pretty obvious, but with the scanner it's a little bit of a black box. So you might, for example, get signed out halfway through a scan and just be hitting some kind of unauthenticated page without really realizing it. And we're working on changes to core Burp to automatically notice and fix that kind of stuff in the future. But for right now, I recommend always having the Flow or Logger++ extensions installed. And they will give you a decent overview of what traffic Burp's sending and how successful that traffic is. And what if something is going wrong? Well, I sit next to the guys that do technical support for Burp Suite, and I can safely say most of the time, if something isn't working, there's some kind of crazy, slightly dodgy workaround that you can do that will fix it. Session handling rules are great for fixing issues, and also some things they're not quite powerful enough for, but you may find that what you can do is simply chain your version of Burp Suite to another version of Burp Suite upstream.
You can often work around common problems by launching a second instance of Burp, telling the first instance of Burp to proxy its traffic through the second instance, and then defining proxy match and replace rules to fix whatever issues you're having. Not that that's a very memory efficient solution. If you want a more robust solution to something, you may find that you need to write an extension, which we have tried to make as easy as possible. And also quite a few other people may have already encountered your problem, coded up an extension and shared it via the BAP store. So it's always worth checking the BAP store to see if someone's already fixed your problem on there. Failing that, there's also the slightly secret Burp Suite IRC channel. That's burp_suite on irc.freenode.net. There's some pretty good people hanging out in there. Please use one of these systems rather than contacting me directly on Twitter or such like. Okay, that's pretty much it. Although this was pre-recorded, I am actually here at the moment live, so if you have any questions, now's the time to ask.